So today we are starting empires. I think this week is a nice little crossover week. I don't think the content is really that hard. There's a couple of nuances of complications that we covered last week. Like last week was a whole transitional change. Yes, we understand that with the formation of empires, the conquering of territory. So we're going to add some complexity to it this week, and then next week we're going to do a big jump. Does that make sense? So it's kind of like a slow transition. Last week was a huge transition. We're just going to add a little bit more complexity to it, and then next week we'll add a pretty big jump again. But here we go. Africa. Okay, so for Africa, you do need to know that it is the Portuguese who are really controlling it at this point. It's really being dominated by the Portuguese at this point. This is going to about, the time period I'm referring to is going to about the 1580s. And the reason is because they have, what type of port system do they have? What are we calling their little empire in Africa? They have trade post empires. There you go, write it down. The Portuguese trade post empires are really what's happening in Africa. What is a trade post empire, Lily?
It's when they go to ports and they claim them for their country.
Okay, but are they controlling it politically, economically? No. They're just controlling the ports. Because most of Africa is not really sailing. There's only one coast of Africa that is sailing, and what coast is that? Thomas? East Africa is the only one sailing because they're sailing in the Indian Ocean basin. West Africa is just open water. They didn't know the Americas were there. So they're not sailing really. It's just the East Coast that's really sailing. So all along the West Coast and the southern side of Africa is all going to be controlled by the Portuguese. So keep that in mind. You need to understand that the Portuguese, no one wants Europeans. That's like the theme of the week. Write it down. This is like the big theme. No one wants Europeans. Okay, no one wants them. And a specific example in Africa is going to be the Kingdom of Congo. Congo with K. It's also up on my thing. The Kingdom of Congo is an African tribe on the west coast of Africa. And they are going to align with the Dutch. Write it down. The Kingdom of Congo are trying to kick the Portuguese out and align themselves with the Dutch. So the Africans and the Dutch are working together to try to get rid of the Portuguese. It almost works, but who eventually wins? The Portuguese barely win. Okay, the Dutch were doing this. Is it because the Dutch are some morally superior people? No, they're trying to get a foothold into Africa because they already have the West Indies. They're trying to get a foothold into Africa. Fighting with the Kingdom of Congo would give them some access. They almost won, but they didn't win. But this is a perfect example of Africans fighting back. Okay. You need to know that in Japan, the Japanese are rejecting Europeans because because it's affecting their monoculture. Japan is all about their protection of their culture, and it's a huge deal. Okay? They allowed Europeans in because they thought they were kind of like everyone else. They're kind of working, not pervasive. The Europeans are pervasive. Now, whether you agree or disagree, that's your opinion. However, missionaries really believe that they are saving people's lives by converting them to Jesus. And if you really believed you were saving someone's life by converting people to Jesus, you're going to be very determined because you think it's a battle between life and death. Yes? So, when these Europeans show up, specifically missionaries, they are dead set to have it. They take no for an answer, and that what makes them different than everywhere else. So, in 1587, write it down. I don't need you to memorize it, but I need you to kind of know it's in 1587. They're going to close their borders and kick out all Christians. Okay, they're going to close their borders. Japan is the only country in the world that is going to close their borders. They do it technically twice. The first time to keep the Mongols out, the second time to keep the Europeans out. They're not going to open it until the 1880s. Write it down. They reopen in the 1880s. Question, is there big changes that occur from 1587 to 1880s?
Yes.
Yeah, a huge change, aka the Industrial Revolution. Okay, the Industrial Revolution is going to happen to Europe. We see Europe is starting to rise in power, but they're not the most powerful nations yet. When the Industrial Revolution comes in, who is cemented as the most powerful nations in the world? Europeans. So the transition of power is going to be hugely significant. Between 1587 to the 1880s, we see a huge change in power. What do you got?
So does Japan like fall really behind because
Absolutely. But Japan is going to industrialize using their economy, using their government, and they're going to industrialize really, really quickly. Does anyone know who forces Japan open? Who is it, Thomas?
U.S.
Yeah, an American shows up on an iron ship and says, open your doors. And they're like, no, you weirdo, who are you? And we say, we're America. And then we blow up a mountain. No, like we literally blow up a mountain in the port of Tokyo.
Is it just to like prove?
Just to show that they should open their doors. And they're like, holy shit, what is this? And then the funny thing is, just for you. So they open their doors and they're like, holy shit, America. And we're like, yeah. And we come in and we're like, you're behind. And they're like, we're behind. And so we're like, we're going to help industrialize you. So America makes a lot of money off of Japan industrializing. But what happens in 1941? Yeah, the Japanese bomb us at Pearl Harbor. We go straight to war. Who taught the Japanese everything they know? Who do they wage a very, very tough war against? Who did we drop 2 atomic bombs on? Japan. Who we taught literally how to do everything that they do. Full circle. Okay, but that's where it's going. We haven't got there quite yet.
Are we
All right.
really good allies with Japan now?
We are. We're very friendly. So much so, the first place Donald Trump went once he came into office is Japan, because of the Marshall Plan, which was very generous to the Japanese, which has allowed them to rebuild their economy and allowed them to recover so successfully, which is why we have such positive relations. All right, here we go. All right, Japan, you need to know that they're going to close the doors in 1587. They're going to keep them closed until the 1880s. You need to know that they are kicking out Christians. The biggest thing is that they're fearful of Christianity. Second thing you need to know that they are going to be isolated, except they will keep trading with the Dutch. Why are they trading with the Dutch in 1587? Why, Marla? Why do they pick the Dutch? Is it because they're the most successful in the region or the worst? In 1557, the Dutch are the most powerful country in the region. What is going to very quickly decline? The Dutch. Do you think the Dutch are going to educate the Japanese? Hey, you're only talking to us. Let me tell you, we are actually not that powerful anymore. Literally every European country is better than us at this point in the 1800s. Do you think they're saying that? No. So they're keeping up this whole game of like, yeah, we're still dominating world power, yes. And America shows up and they're like, who the hell are these guys? And the Dutch are like, oh, we forgot to tell you. Some wild shit has gone on and we just forgot to tell you. Okay, so the Dutch are the reason why they are picked, and that is going to lead to their downfall. Because of the Dutch doing their best to keep them informed? No, because if the Dutch were keeping them informed, then they would realize that the Dutch aren't that powerful. And they didn't want to lose their power. All right. Here we go. China. You need to know that China also doesn't like Europeans. Africa doesn't want them. China doesn't want them. All right. The Ming Dynasty. What is the only thing the Ming care about, Gianni?
Their culture.
Yeah, their culture. Okay, so they only care about their culture, and then we have a bunch of Europeans showing up, and they find them annoying, and so what are they going to do? They're going to start banning foreign trade. Is that the opposite of what China has historically been? Absolutely, and that's what makes the Ming Dynasty so shockingly un-Chinese, because it used to be the center of the world. The Ming are purposely saying, like, yeah, we don't care about this stuff anymore, and they're going to try to ban it. Okay, you do need to know that they are going to destroy all of their docks, and they're going to limit the size of their ships. Now, this is going to start happening in the 1580s. How do ships become more important to war as time goes by? Absolutely. We're going to start seeing the evolution of navies starting up here very quickly. So the fact that China doesn't have anything in a naval form, especially in the 1800s, which is when China's going to be conquered by the Europeans officially and outright. This is going to lead to a huge collapse. So the reason why they destroyed all their ports is because they didn't want Europeans specifically, but foreigners. They didn't want any foreigners coming into China. They really wanted to focus on themselves, so that's why they do it. Long term, is it going to work out for them?
No.
Hell no. Hell no. All right. India is where we're going next. India is not afraid of Europeans when they first arrive. You need to know that. They're the only country that is kind of like, okay, come on. They're kind of even on them. They don't hate them. They don't like them. Everyone else hates them. They're fine with it. Why has India got the confidence? Why do they have the confidence to walk right up, Stella? They do, but they also have way more money. You need to understand that in India, we have the Mughal dynasty. Remember, they're the wealthiest empire in the history of the world. So when a bunch of Europeans start showing up, they're not that worried about it because who's got the money? India. So they're like, they can't mess with us. Look how much money. You all know the biggest punk at this school is the richest kid at the school, right? He's a little twerp that you can beat up really quickly, but he has lots of money and you don't want his dad or mom to sue you. That's why you don't beat up the kid. India was that way. They had all the money. They didn't think that England would really be that big of a threat because they're the ones with all the resources. Well, oopsies! That's not going to go well for them. You need to know that England will trade equally and fairly with the Mughal to start. The early trade, England and the Mughal will trade equally and fairly. But let's be honest with each other. What's more cost effective, stealing or purchasing? Yeah. So the British are paying crazy amounts of money and they're like, wait a second. If I just steal this country, if I just capture it, kill all the leaders and make myself the government leader, then I don't have to pay for it. So what do? Here we go. The British are going to conquer India outright. They're going to start by, they're going to start conquering in the 1780s. Not 1780s, in the 1680s. Okay, they're going to start conquering. They're doing it to make it more cost effective for them. When we say conquer, ladies and gentlemen, they are removing the government and replacing it with its own government. It's the beginning of colonization. Write it down. The British are going to take over India starting in the 1680s. They are replacing the government with their own government. This is the beginning of colonialism, which will lead to imperialism. This is the future of the world, and the first place it's happening is in India. Why is it happening in India? Why is that the first place to get colonized and then imperialized? Thomas. It is the center of trade. Guys, all of the jewels and the crown jewels of England come from what country? India. Do you think they're paying fair trade for that shit? Hell no. They stole it. They literally stole it. The big, I think I've told you this, the big ruby that they wear in one of the crowns. Oh, the big sapphire is called the heart of some Hindu god. And they literally went up to the chair and popped it out of the chair. And now it's sitting in the Tower of London. I mean, that's what they did. That they just literally stole this stuff. And it is sacred. It is valuable. It has been in India for thousands of years. It has been a major focal point of Hindu prayers. And now it's sitting in the Tower of London. Colonialism. All right. You need to know that in the Americas, we are starting to, Spain and Portugal still hate each other. They still hate each other to this day. They're still on opposite sides of wars, even when it's Hitler. Yeah, you would think a Hitler would be a unifying force, not for Spain and Portugal. They just can't be on the same team because they hate each other. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, the rivalry of Spain and Portugal will lead to the decline of Spain. Write it down. That rivalry is absolutely going to cause the decline of Spain to lose to England because they spend so much time and energy fighting on that. Okay, but there is a new rivalry in Europe, which is going to be a big, big, big deal for a long time. And the newest rivalry is going to be between England and
Dutch.
France.
Oh.
Germany doesn't really become a major player until Industrial Revolution. Okay. England and France hate each other. They have hated each other since the dawn of time. They've always hated each other throughout their history. They love killing each other. It's really a beautiful thing that they do. They join wars so they can just simply kill each other. Do you think the French are really passionate about American democracy, which is why they volunteered to help us in the American Revolution? No, they just literally wanted to kill British people. They signed up for our war so they could help us kill British people because they love killing British people. They love it. This rivalry is going to lead to the 7 Years' War, the American Revolution, the American Civil War. Okay? All of these things are going to be contributed to the rivalry between England and France. If you're like the Civil War, what the hell does that have to do with England and France? Oh, let me tell you. The hatred of England, of French people is beautiful. They're very bitter, and I love it. Today in 2023, did the British hate the French?
No.
No, it's not until World War I. World War I is the first time they actually fight on the same side, and they actually got along, and they were very successful, and they changed the world, those two countries together. It wasn't until World War II did they become best friends, and they are best friends today. That's why they got a little tunnel so they can go see each other quickly. I love it. Okay? So, the biggest rivalry, new rivalry on the block in Europe is going to be between England and France. These are the two rising powers. Of course, who's the most powerful nation? England. France is probably number 2 or number 3. You can start arguing that. Germany is starting to rise, but it's not quite there yet. Okay, so let's talk about the French and Indian War. Okay, underneath it fits under the rivalry of England and France, so it's totally fine there. So let's do the 7 Years' War. That's your next little subheading. You can leave it under there. Yeah, it's part of it. Yeah. Okay, so let's do the 7 Years' War. The 7 Years' War is between the EOC and the VOC. The 7 Years' War is between the EOC and the VOC. If these are two trading post empires, it's all about trade. It's about trade rights. So write it down. This war is about trade rights. Okay? When we're talking about the 7 Years' War, it is the first world war. Excuse me. It is the first world war in history. It is fought on 3 fronts. What is a front? Izzy, what is a front?
Like a location.
Yeah. So in World War II, how many fronts did we fight on? Are you a World War II person? From the blank look on your face, I would say not. Joshua, how many fronts did we fight on?
Was there a lot?
No. What do you got, Luke?
Wasn't it like 3?
It's 2. We fought on 2 fronts, people. We fought in the Pacific, okay, with Japan, right? We talked about how they bombed us at Pearl Harbor. We bombed them twice with the atomic to end it. And then the second front is in Europe, right? Nazis, yes, D-Day, all of those things. So it's 2 fronts. Fronts are where wars are happening. In the 7 Years' War that we're discussing right now, it is on 3 fronts. It is in the Indian Ocean Basin. It is in Europe. And it is in the New World. And what do we call the New World battle, Nola? You just asked me about it.
Oh, the French and Indian War.
It's called the French and Indian War in the New World. So when we refer to the 7 Years' War, we usually just call it the French and Indian War because that's the front we were fighting on. Okay, you need to know it is England versus France and the Dutch. It is England versus France and the French and the Dutch. Who wins? England wins, but it's a tough fight. It's a tough fight, and they do squeak by. They do win. With that being said, that makes and concretes England as the most powerful nation. However, it begins weakening them for us which is why we get to win in our revolution less than 100 years later. What?
If the Dutch had won in like Africa against the Portuguese, like with the Congo and stuff, do you think they would have had a better chance of winning against?
Yes, of
them?
course. They would have had way more resources. Once they would have gotten a foothold into, they just needed a port. That's what they were fighting for. Is they just needed a port, and then they could start expanding. Because the Dutch Navy, the Dutch live on the canals. That's Amsterdam. Yes, you've seen Amsterdam. You know it's all rivers and stuff like that. It's the lowest land in the country. Their navy is like one of the best, which is why the Dutch and the British were fighting against each other. They just couldn't get a foothold in. And then if they got a foothold in Africa, I mean, it's so funny, like how the world would be different, right? Because like so many things. If one little thing has changed, what is the actual impact? Isn't it like the butterfly effect or some shit? Here we go. So, 7 Years' War. You could put a little star. This is some nice little, oh my god, what's it called when we're pulling it to a future event?
Analysis.
Oh my god, you guys are so good. I have a headache and I'm kind of getting my butt kicked. And your analysis is the French and Indian War will open the door for American independence during the Age of Revolutions. So it's because of the French and Indian War that America start getting taxed. Yes, sugar tax. Oh my god, my head hurts so bad. Sugar tax, stamp tax. See, he's got it. And that's why we get all these taxes, and that drives up taxes. No taxation without representation. All the shit that we screamed. That's all because of the taxes raised by the war. What?
So the Native Americans
They're with the French because they love the French. Yeah, it's the French and Indian War because the British are fighting the French and the Indians at the same time. But keep in mind, if you're a Native American, what group of people do you hate the most? What colonizers? You hate the British because the British are just going to shoot you on demand. The French actually need you, and they're using you, and it's much more of an equal relationship, but not equal. Like, don't think, oh wow, the French are not racist. That is not what I'm saying. Anyway, okay. Here we go. You need to know that the world is still trading. You need to know that the Portuguese are the ones leading slave trade. They're the ones leading slave trade. Okay, and they're also making money off of their tariffs off of the port. So that's how Portugal is kind of limping around. We know that Portugal rose and then fell pretty quick, and then Spain rose, and then that's going to fall after a couple hundred years, and now the British are up. The Portuguese are somewhat relevant during this time just because they have so many of these trading post empires, and they're making money off the ports. That's how they're doing it. They're also the largest slavers in the world, Portugal. So that's all you need to know about them. Okay. New World is where we're heading here, people. Skip a space, center it. Okay. You need to understand that the Spanish are spending their time in the New World mining and growing cash crops. But what are they spending most of their time doing? Mining. Mining is their big thing. Bye. Oh my god, when we waste so much time, it kind of goes by quick. I don't want to do this. Bye!